We turn now to payment systems in a checkless and cashless society. Our presenter is Mr. Henry Ohlsson, and he is the Deputy Governor of Sveriges Riksbank, or in English, Central Bank of Sweden. He began his 6-year term at the Central Bank of Sweden in January 2015. He's a member of the European Central Bank's International Relations Committee, as well as a member of the Regional Consultative Group of the Financial Stability Board. He's also Professor of Economics at Uppsala University, and he's on leave from that university as he carries out his duties at the Central Bank. He's going to be joining us remotely, so you can write your questions as he speaks so that we can have a very smooth session. Dr. Ohlsson, are you ready?
Yes, I am.
Let's give him a round of applause as we welcome him.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak to your meeting today. I would very much have liked to join you in person, but that's not possible this time. So you have to listen to me and see me over a link. So I'm going to talk about what we are experiencing right now in Sweden, where our economy is more and more going towards becoming cashless. The structure of my talk today will be that I will start with some basic facts about the situation in Sweden today. I will talk about how this happened, the main determinants of this process, and the third part of the talk will be the pros and cons of a cashless society. There are some important issues relating elderly and unbanked people when a society goes cashless, and I will touch upon that. And the final part of my talk will be on the e-krona project, our project on developing an electronic version of our Swedish currency. But a starting point is this slide. Here you see the cash in circulation in Sweden. The red line is the nominal value of cash being used in the Swedish economy. And as you see, 2008, 2009, after a continuous increase of the use of cash, suddenly and very quickly the use went down. The red line is the nominal value of cash out in the economy. The blue line is the value out there as a share of GDP. And there you see a continuous decline. Now, the decrease in the use of cash in Sweden, you can find the same thing in other Nordic countries, whereas, for instance, in the US, within the euro area, and in Japan, the value of outstanding cash is increasing, not decreasing, as in our economy. Here is these bars show a survey that we do every second year. And the question people have answered is, which means of payment have you used in the past month? And as you see, the three bars to the left are for 2014, 16, and 18. And you see that fewer and fewer people have been using cash. Debit cards are very popular, and about 95% of the people have used debit cards. Swish, the three bars to the right, Swish is our instant payment system in Sweden, where you connect your bank accounts to your mobile phone, and you can use your phone and transfer money to other people. And here you see that the last years, we have a considerable increase in the use of instant payments. And I can say the last payment I did was yesterday evening. I used the instant payment system at home using my mobile phone. And in the survey, we also have a question, what did you use, which means of payment did you use the last time you made a transaction? And you see from the bars to the left that in 2010, almost 40% used cash the last transaction, whereas in 2018, only 13% used cash. We believe we have two parallel processes going on here. The demand for using cash is going down, but now we are at so low levels of cash use that also traders, they don't want to take cash. They prefer the instant payments and cards. And we believe that after 2025, only about 50% of Swedish traders will accept cash. It's very common today in Sweden that you enter a store and there's a sign, this is a cashless store. You can also enter a bank and you can find a sign, this is a cashless bank. And that's quite interesting. But so far, the central bank is not cashless, so we still have cash at the central bank. So what can explain this rapid decrease in the use of cash? Well, this has been market driven. Politicians, they have largely been passive and they have watched this happen. So we haven't seen any new laws protecting the use of cash. According to Swedish law, you can put up a sign saying, I don't accept cash, and that's fine. It's the freedom of making contracts. So the politicians have not been prepared to introduce laws protecting the use of cash. Cards are accepted in principle everywhere in our economy. And almost all households, they have cards. Even young children have cards. And almost all retailers, they are terminals for the use of cards. We have also seen some changes in the tax system that has, these changes have meant that the incentives for using cash has gone down. And basically, we have introduced tax deductions for household services, but in order for claiming these deductions, you need to have receipts. So there's no incentive to use cash to avoid tax payments. And there are also cash registers requirements for retailers. So the incentives to avoid paying taxes using cash at stores has also gone down. In addition, there are demographic factors. Younger generations, they use less cash, they love their mobile phones, and when it became possible to use the phones to make transactions, young people were really quick to start to use the instant payment systems. And we see a lot of urbanization in Sweden, an increase in the level of education. And this has meant that people use more mobile phones and people have been interested in using the digital services rather than cash. More than 50% of the bank branches in Sweden are cashless now. So you don't go there to deposit or withdraw cash. You do that in ATM machines. When you go to the bank, you discuss, well, loans and things like that, insurances and other things, but not withdrawing or cash. Now, to have instant payment systems, you need to have some kind of cooperation between the banks that are around in a country. And in Sweden, there is a culture of cooperation in infrastructure issues among banks. We see that they have a joint company for ATM machines, for instance, and they have joined forces in setting up this instant payment system also. Swedes love new technology. Very quickly, Swedes started to use mobile phones. We see a country with a population there where the households are very adapt new technology very rapidly, and people believe in and trust new technology. And basically all people have to have handheld devices. There's a ranking in the World Economic Forum on network readiness, and Sweden is among the top 3 countries in this ranking. There are, in principle, in every store, there are substitutes for cash at the point of sales. You can even use your mobile phone in some places to pay, but cards are accepted almost everywhere. And the instant payment system is a substitute for cash, mostly in person-to-person transactions. So the transaction I made last evening was to my daughter-in-law. She's supposed to buy a birthday present for my son, her husband. And the easiest way to send her the money was simply to use the mobile phone. Don't tell my son. He's supposed not to know about this. New services are added to these systems all the time, and you can also use the instant payment systems nowadays in many stores and restaurants and so on. So you don't even have to bring a card, you just bring your mobile phone. There are advantages from the reduced use of cash. There's an increased in efficiency in the payment system. These things are really rapid, and you don't have to transport cash around in the country. This means better working conditions in shops and so on. It's more safe for the people working in shops with electronic payments than having large amounts of cash around. And it has the use of cards and instant payment systems also reduced the shadow economy. But there are difficulties also around. There are nowadays increased difficulties in withdrawing cash. We have fewer and fewer ATM machines in the country. So if you want to use cash, it's more complicated to get the cash now than it was some years ago. It's also increasingly difficult to deposit cash. The banks find it very costly to take cash, so they basically are very hesitant to receive cash. Some groups and in some situations, though, this development has created problems. There will always be a proportion of the population that will have problems using digital solutions, and therefore, when the economy goes cashless, you create problems for people. A simple example is that people who have problems with their eyes, They might use cash because they can feel the size of the bill with their fingers. But how can you feel the size of an electronic payment? It's impossible for people with problems with their eyes. So there's a strong need to come up with solutions for these groups that cannot participate in this development with more and more less cash and more electronic solutions. And you might also think about a situation where there's a severe crisis in the country and the electronic systems will not work because of lack of electricity and things like that. Then you probably would need to have cash. So we are discussing quite a lot, how to combine these developments we see with a situation where there might be a crisis in the country. And another obstacle is that using cash, there's a lot of integrity in using cash. It's not registered anywhere, and for private integrity, you might find this very preferable. And of course, if you go into the electronic world, things are much easier to trace. And you might wonder if how far we shall go and how private really transactions should be. Nowadays, all the transactions in Sweden, most at least, are known to the big card companies. And this is information that is valuable and also sold to interested advertisers. And you might ask, is this a good development or not? There are no easy alternatives for us as a central bank. Here you have three alternatives for us. To the right is the alternative, do nothing. But then you might ask, can private interests handle all the groups and the risks in society? There will be a new territory for the monetary system and also for monetary policy. And you might wonder if this alternative really creates a robust situation. A second alternative is to go into detailed regulation. The payment system is a natural monopoly in the sense that you can only have one or a few networks. And pricing is notoriously difficult. So that might be difficult for regulators. And if you choose regulation, you also say that the general public will not have access to central bank money. Now the banks, they can always get central bank money. But for the public right now, cash is the only way to have a claim on the central bank. And if we go for regulation and if we don't do anything, then the access for the general public to central bank money will disappear. It will disappear with the cash. So the third alternative that we are exploring is the introduction of an electronic version of the bills that we are issuing today, an electronic krona. This is new territory for central banks. And we don't know yet, the effects on other policy areas or how monetary policy will be affected. But this is the route we have taken. And I will, this part of my talk, I will tell you about our electronic krona project. So what have we done? Well, in 2017, we started brainstorming at the bank. And we started asking and trying to answer questions like, what is an e-krona? What can it do? which are the consequences, are there any legal issues, and so on. And in 2018, we started to do some deeper analysis on these issues. And we have published a couple of reports on the project, both a report in 2017 and one in 2018. These reports are available in English from the Riksbank's webpage, so it's just to go there and download it for those of you who are interested in reading about what we have done in the project so far. So the basic functions of an e-krona would be a means of payment between households and companies. The idea is that it should be accessible all the time, 24 hours per day, 7 days a week. It should be denominated in Swedish kroner. There are two possible versions of the electronic krona. One is a value-based. You can think of an e-krona as a plastic card that you can load with money from the central bank, and then you can use this card to pay in stores or transfer the money to other people. You can also think of it as an application in a mobile phone. An application, you can load it with money from your regular bank, and you simply transfer money to this application or to the card, and then you start using it and paying it. Very similar, I would say, to a bill. It's just that it might be in plastic and not in paper. A more advanced version would be to have an account-based electronic krona. That would mean that we would open an account for all interested citizens in Sweden at the central bank. A simple bank account, and from that they can make payments either using cards or applications with their mobile phones. But that's a more advanced version of the introduction of an electronic krona. Now, if we go for an account-based solution, there is no legal support for paying interest on e-krona accounts. So at least initially it will not be interest-bearing. And if you hold a bill, you don't get interest either. So a non-interest-bearing account is very, very similar to a bill. For us, there is a question of should there be anonymity? Yes, probably, but if the legal system wants to look into their transactions, we are legally binded to allow them to do so. But we certainly will not sell the information to interested advertisers. It's also a question of the e-krona working even in an offline situation. So the idea is to go with the market, not against it. We think of this as having the e-krona as a platform, and then payment service providers can build on the platform that we provide, and payers and payees can make their payments. But the base will still be the e-krona platform. So as I said, we started to discuss this in 2017. And then we had a first report. We went on in the second phase during 2018 and some deeper analysis. And recently the executive board of the Riksbank decided for a third phase. And this will be a 2-year project. We will look further into the changes in Swedish law that will be needed. But we will also start some pilot studies, really building the thing and testing the thing during these 2 years. We will discuss with other government agencies how an e-krona would fit into their operations. And there are some possible economies of scale having an e-krona both with respect to tax collection, but also for the ministries doing a lot of public expenditure and transfers to the population. We will do this for 2 years, and then after phase 3, then we will make the final decision whether or not to continue and really introduce the e-krona. So we'll see in 2 years if this will materialize in reality. So the e-krona pilot and the technical solutions. Well, we need to increase our knowledge in this area. We will not study the account-based system now. We will go for the simpler value-based system. But we would like in 2 years' time really to have a very good idea of how the technology will look if we introduce the e-krona. There are many fintech companies operating in Sweden, and we have received great interest from these companies. So the necessary technical competence that we need for doing this, we can procure it from very interested companies close to us. So this is my final slide. What we will look into more is also issues of central bank money and the confidence in the monetary system. When we see this development with less and less cash, payments moving from a situation where the central bank has some kind of control over it, over to the private market, might introduce risks with respect to confidence in the monetary system. And we will also look into access to the e-krona and liquidity provision. There will also, of course, be costs of running this system and setting up this system, and we need to figure out who shall pay and in which ways. And we also need to look into issues like competition. The e-krona is supposed to be an alternative to cash. The objective is not to compete with regular banks. I stop there and I will listen to your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ohlsson. That was indeed a very exciting and informative discussion that you have opened up for us now. I'm going to open the floor for questions. Again, if you have any, please come out into the aisle, stand, and someone will hand you a mic and you can ask the question. Okay, whilst you're warming up, I have a question. Dr. Ohlsson, I noted that you said that Sweden is now becoming cashless, but you have the issue of unbanked persons, and these may be persons who have age on the side, might be 65 years and over, or persons with type of fear. Can you expand a bit on what you plan to do with this set of persons in society?
What we are discussing, and we have been in contact with several organizations representing different parts of the population that we think might have a problem with this digital transformation of the payment system. But we also are discussing with the fintech companies, and we are trying innovation and new ideas how to make it possible for inclusion of also people that might have initially have problems. I think that these solutions, the cost of developing these things might be pretty high, but I think that we need to go through this. I think democracy is that all the people can be included in the payment system, and we just need to figure out how everybody can be included. It will be a process of innovation and trying new ideas, but I think that in almost all cases we can find ways of finding technology that will work for everybody. It might be costly, but if you make the initial investments, then maybe the private market can build on platforms that we provide.
Thank you, Dr. Ohlsson. Anyone want to add any other questions? I know Barbados is moving towards being a checkless society. I'm not sure about the being cashless, at least not for the moment. Yes, Governor Hayes?
Yes, thank you very much for that presentation. Two issues sort of were raised indirectly. One is, if you issue the e-krona, is it really essential for individuals to become customers of the central bank, or could you transfer those e-kronas to the commercial banks and allow the traditional mechanism to work in the way that it normally works? And secondly, you mentioned fintech, and I assume therefore you're considering the use of like distributed ledger technology, and are you concerned about the volume of transactions that will be able to happen without clear proper scalability, and whether you will be able to get enough transactions through, or this will actually slow the financial system down?
I'm afraid that I have difficulties in hearing the questions. There are some technical problems, unfortunately. I think that, can you repeat the questions?
Sure. The first question had to do with whether or not it was absolutely necessary to have the individuals as customers of the central bank, or if you could continue to transfer the electronic kroner to the commercial banks and allow the system to work as it would normally. And secondly, whether you were concerned about the speed of transactions if you are using distributed ledger technology.
Let me start with the second question. We have we have thought a lot about the question, why introducing the e-krona, to figure out the good reasons, motivations for doing it. Now we start looking at the question how to do it in a more technical sense. I think that we will probably be using all the new technologies that are around out there that turn out to be good. And it might be distributed ledger and other things that people have come up with. To your first question, I mean, our starting point will not be to have an account system for all the citizens. It will be a value-based e-krona, either a card or an application in mobile phones. And we need to interact, of course, with the banks, because people should be able to transfer money back and forth from their regular bank accounts to the value-based cards or applications. But I think that it's an important thing to give the general public access to central bank money if they want to. I mean, there should be a choice whether to have regular bank money or central bank money. Most of the time, these alternatives will be very equal for most people. But if you run into a crisis situation I'm sure that many people would prefer to having central bank money than just regular bank money. And today they can go from bank money to central bank money by withdrawing cash. But in a cashless society, we think that that should be an alternative. But the whole system needs to be very much integrated with the bank system and with the card systems. So we will not build something that is completely on its own.
We will certainly be paying close attention to developments in Sweden. I see Deputy Governor Michelle, you have a question?
Good morning, and thanks again for such an informative presentation. It certainly touches on a couple of issues that we too are brainstorming around in terms of how to advance our efforts with regard to electronic payment penetration, as well as the value added in terms of local currency in digital form. One related issue that I'm curious about in terms of the pilot that you're describing is whether issues related to cross-border movement of the e-krona and how it fits in terms of you defining your money supply and then your policy-related concerns, how that will be represented within the project and the further review that you're mentioning.
Well, first of all, Sweden is a member of the European Union, and the opportunities that we give to Swedish citizens will have to apply to all citizens within the European Union. You know, a picture I have in my mind is that if you come to Sweden, and instead of going to an exchange bureau office, you can use your if you want kroner, you can use your credit card and go to a machine and get a plastic card with e-kroner. So you transfer from your credit card and you get e-kroner instead of getting Swedish bills. So I see, in the future that we might have a system like that. It might be that also that you can. If the market wants to, that you can get e-kroner and these plastic cards or applications anywhere in the world, just as you nowadays can get bills denominated in Swedish kroner. We are looking into legal issues. If we go for an account system, then people living abroad might want to have accounts in the Riksbank, and it's probably so that if the foreigners are European Union citizens, then we have to give them accounts if they want to. So I think that this will be very much integrated in the economy of the neighboring countries, but also countries abroad. I think of it, as I said, very much like, a different. If you go to an exchange bureau, you don't get bills. You will get a plastic card, or you will load up an application in your mobile phone.
Thank you, Dr. Ohlsson. Are there any other questions? So everybody in Barbados is ready to go cashless. That means I'll be out of a job. Incidentally, were there any changes in the structure of central bank with the decline in the demand for cash?
No, I mean, we haven't had any preferences for this. This has been mainly driven by people wanting to use other ways of paying. Now the network is at such a low level, so there are problems for people who want to pay, want to use cash, and this is a concern for us. I would say the Riksbank did one major change, and that is that 20, 30 years ago, we had many offices all across the country, and we distributed cash across the country from these different regional offices. And we were very close to the people using cash. So the regional organization is removed. There are no subsidies to cash distribution now. There's a single point where cash can be picked up by the banks, and they have a joint company doing this business. So the banks are distributing cash across the country, not the central bank. And they also have to pay the cost of this. So there are no subsidies to the use of cash from the Riksbank. There used to be, but no longer. So the use of cash will have to pay its own way.
Thanks. Yes, you can go ahead.
Good morning. The commercial banks in Barbados are actually starting this journey, and as we're starting with payments and specifically checks. Thankfully, the government has really come on board with that and has started to work towards checklists at least, and we see that as the first step along the way. But we do want to go all the way in terms of payment systems and very shortly to the same peer-to-peer and merchant cashless with phones and so on the same way. Is there anything you can share with us in terms of things we should be thinking about given or short-term trajectory about in the interim?
I will phrase it like this. The development, the decrease in the use of cash is extremely rapid in the Nordic countries, and we are the first to experience this. At the Riksbank, we have decided that we need to do something about it. We are sure that along the way, we will make many mistakes. So my advice is learn from our mistakes.
We intend to.
Yeah.
Any advice in terms of going checkless? What were some of the obstacles that you may have had in Sweden, and how did you overcome that?
Honestly, I haven't seen a check in Sweden for 30 years. I think that, but this has also been very much determined, if other ways of paying are introduced and people find it more convenient to use these other things, then old technology will disappear. Sometimes slowly and other times really rapidly. So my only advice is you need to come up with some solutions for people to pay that are considered better than using the checks. And I understand that you want to go checkless because it's a very old technology and it's not at all efficient. There are much more efficient ways of designing a system. So I can understand that you want to go checkless.
Okay, I think that is good advice. We at the Central Bank back in 2002 had introduced the RTGS system and the ACH, and that was our way of sort of stirring up the payment system, and we would have ensured that the commercial banks use the RTGS system to pay for their issues of cash and our suppliers, we would have moved to pay them through the ACH. So we started our journey of being cashless, but I think it's open now to the banks and other entrepreneurs to come up with other payment systems that would replace checks and eventually some cash, not all. You want to use the mic and make a comment? Fear not. No, we're not fearful. Minister Strawn, you're very quiet. Okay.
Oh, good morning. Um, I have a question for you, which is, you indicated earlier that we need to go with the market, not against it. I take it then that your experience has been that it's the customers who preferred to have digital ways of transaction. Because in Barbados, what we have seen from a presentation this morning is that a larger percentage of Barbadians are using their debit cards and credit cards, which means there's some appetite for it. Would you advise us to try to increase that appetite to use debit card and go rapidly to a cashless society, which is driven from the top down?
I'm not sure that you should add any incentives. What we have seen in Sweden is we haven't had any strong incentives for this process. It's the choice of people, and I think that if more and more people in your country use debit cards, then word will spread, and it's a network system, and if it becomes easier and easier to use cards in more and more places, then I think that the process will take off without any extra incentives created by the central bank or the bank. If it's more convenient to use cards, then sooner or later people will use cards.
Thank you, Dr. Ohlsson. Okay, Minister Strawn, I'll give you opportunity to say a word or two.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks very much, Governor Ohlsson, for your presentation. Now, we are in a phase where we are trying to make sure that we modernize the way that we do business. And I'm talking about government now, and leading the process with respect to having the economy placed on a platform where the citizen can do business as easily as possible. Now, from our perspective, certainly in the Ministry of Finance, the way that government conducts its business with its citizens, I think is going to be of critical importance in terms of the evolution of the payment systems. And whilst the discussion about whether or not whether citizens should have an account with the central bank or through the commercial banks, I really see some very positive disruption in this process. And as the government is seeking to make sure that it can engage with its citizens first as easily as possible, then as we go through this transition over the next year and a half, to achieve, first of all, from the Treasury perspective, eliminate the printing of checks, and we really want to do that as aggressively as by the end of this year to see how far we can go with that, whilst we are putting in the infrastructure to make sure that payments to citizens from government creates the impetus for domestic financial institutions to realize that we have to go and go now. And I really appreciate the presentation because I feel ashamed having written 2 checks yesterday. And I shouldn't have to in 2019. And I think that as we seek to engage citizens, and I know that there's been a lot of pushback in certain areas simply because I think as financial institutions, we haven't impressed upon the citizen and the business people that the maintenance of the way that we've been doing things is costing us too much money to deliver. Now, the truth is that I see this technology creating a lot of disruption for the very institutions in this room, because the competition and the innovation that will come from it will mean that you either be at the cutting edge or you will be left behind. And I think that the government's responsibility now is to make sure that we can push the envelope, because in order for this economy to really start to grow, and to the extent I know that your next presentations will come, the reality is that we have to do this in the interest of the single market and the economy, because we need to be able to make sure that the citizens across the region, that we can mobilize domestic resources and regional resources to deliver the kinds of growth that we would like to see, not just in Barbados, but certainly across the region. And so all I will say to the persons in this room is that as we have started the process, certainly in terms of getting the government's house in order with respect to being able to deliver services to the citizens, I think that in the broader context in terms of payments, and whether it's cashless, checkless, mobile phones, whatever the case, we have to give people the options to be able to do business as easily as possible. And so I really appreciate the presentation, and I swear that I'm going to try to get rid of those checkbooks that I have, because I feel very, very, very passionate about this process, because I think the level of financial intermediation that we've been delivering to the citizens in this country needs a complete overhaul. And certainly the Ministry of Finance is going to be pushing to make sure that we can deliver for our citizens the kind of opportunities, not just for public services, but I think to really take advantage of business opportunities as they come up. And I think that the institutions in this space, there's a role for each and every one of you to play, but you have to appreciate that your mode of operations at the moment will have to change if you're going to stay in the game. And I think that as we go forward, there will be opportunities that will present themselves, and it really comes down to the attitude of those in management and of the organizations to recognize that the change is here, and you have to be, in a sense, riding the wave rather than trying to stop the wave from coming. And I think that the government is committed to making sure that we can do this transformation as easily as possible. It means a significant amount of public engagement, which we will maintain, but it means that for those persons in this space who engage with your stakeholders on a day-to-day basis, that you too must be part of communicating the change and really explaining to the citizen what are the benefits of moving in this direction. And I would love that in 10 years, the governor can say he's not seen a check, because the reality is that we have to start, well, I'm saying 10 only from the perspective that you have to recognize that there's some people, there's some segments of the society, as the governor said, that they will always have these peculiarities that you have to maintain. And then I think that if we're able to do that, then we would have delivered a significant value in terms of transforming the economy. So I really want to thank you, sir, for your presentation, and I think that as we determine from our own end what we do with respect to the Barbados dollar and how central banking and the financial system will evolve, that certainly from government's perspective, we have a clear sense in terms of how we want to engage our citizens with respect to the benefits that we deliver to citizens, and we see the payment platform as integral, as an integral part of us being able to deliver that value for citizens. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister.
My pleasure.
I want to thank all of our contributors this morning, persons who would have added to what Dr. Ohlsson said. And I don't know if Dr. Ohlsson has any final words.
Just that this has been a pleasure for me, and as I understand, I find these issues, these questions, extremely important, and these are challenges for central banks and for the whole financial system. But think that there's only one direction to go, and that is forward. And we will have new technologies earlier in some countries, later in other countries, but the direction will be exactly the same all across the world.
Thank you, Dr. Ohlsson, and remember the change begins with each one of us.